Good evening and welcome to the Channel Studios here in London with your international news around the world in 5. The UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson has quit as the Conservative leader, but says he will continue to serve as PM until the party chooses his successor.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Boris Johnson said it is clearly now the will of Conservative MPs that there should be a new leader. It came after a record number of resignations in 24 hours. More than 40 ministers and aides, including the Chancellor Rishi Sunak, quit on Wednesday over Johnson's handling of allegations of abusive behaviour by a Conservative MP. In his speech, he thanked his wife, Carrie, his children, the NHS, armed forces and Downing Street staff, and said he was sad to be leaving the best job in the world.
It is clearly now the will of the Parliamentary Conservative Party that there should be a new leader of that party and therefore a new Prime Minister. I know that there will be many people who are relieved and perhaps quite a few who will also be disappointed. And I want you to know how sad I am to be giving up the best job in the world.
But Labour Party leader Sir Keir Starmer is demanding Boris Johnson stand down as Prime Minister immediately, saying it's not fair on the country for him to stay on as a caretaker Prime Minister.
The dying act of his political career is to parrot that nonsense.
Insisting Labour will take matters into its own hands if necessary, Starmer warns the Tories that if they don't get rid of Johnson, Labour will, in the national interest, bring a no-confidence vote, because, in his words, this can't go on.
He needs to go completely. None of this nonsense about clinging on for a few months. He's inflicted lies, fraud and chaos in the country. And, you know, we're stuck with a government which isn't functioning in the middle of a cost of living crisis.
Meanwhile, Scotland's First Minister Nicola Sturgeon agreed that Boris Johnson should not be allowed to stay on after tendering his resignation. Sturgeon said a general election would be in the country's best interest, but did not foresee Johnson's ruling Conservative Party calling an early vote.
I think first and foremost there will be an overwhelming and very widespread sense of relief today that Boris Johnson's time as Prime Minister, which should probably never have been allowed to happen in the first place, is coming to an end. I do think it is quite incredible, though, to suggest that he will remain as Prime Minister for another 3 to 4 months. I think the sooner he is out of number 10, and preferably that is today, the better.
In other news, Ukraine says it is investigating more than 21,000 war crimes and crimes of aggression allegedly committed by Russia since the start of its invasion. The Prosecutor General said she was receiving reports of between 200 to 300 war crimes a day. She admitted that many trials would be held in absentia, but stressed that it was a question of justice to continue with the prosecutions. Ukraine says it has uncovered multiple mass graves in Bucha, Borodyanka and other towns near the capital Kyiv that were briefly seized by Russian troops. Sri Lanka's president says he has asked Russia's Vladimir Putin to help his cash-strapped nation import fuel as it faces its worst economic crisis since independence from Britain in 1948. Gotabaya Rajapaksa said he had a very productive discussion with Mr. Putin. It comes a day after hundreds of people took to the streets of the capital, Colombo, to protest against the government. The protests have been led by young people and supported by opposition political parties, trade union and civil society activists, and ordinary civilians. Clashes have broken out in eastern Congo between military and M23 rebels. It comes just a day after Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda agreed to de-escalate tensions from a rebel insurgency. Diplomatic tensions have risen sharply between the neighbours since the M23 rebel group began a major offensive in Congo's eastern borderlands at the end of March. Congo has accused Rwanda of backing the group, something Kigali denies. And finally, Pamplona in Spain has seen its first famous bull run after a 2-year hiatus due to COVID restrictions. Hundreds of runners were chased through the narrow city centre streets by steers and specially bred fighting bulls to Pamplona's bull ring, where the 800-metre course ends. 3 runners were taken to hospital due to injuries caused by falls, but nobody was gored. At least 16 runners have lost their lives at the event since records began. This year's run lasted 2 minutes and 35 seconds. And that's your international news around the world in 5. Now back to the Channel Studios in Lagos.